Add some laughs to your theater season. Steppenwolf presents Noises Off by Michael Frayn and directed by Tony Award-winning ensemble member Anna D. Shapiro. A co-production with the Geffen Playhouse, the Daily Herald calls this play within a play fast, furious, and ferociously funny, and there ain't a car or a Vin Diesel in sight. New City says the cast delivers a seriously zany show, which I'm pretty sure means hella funny. Extended by demand through November 3rd only. The show must close November 3rd. Buy tickets starting at just $20 at steppenwolf.org. Chicago's favorite holiday tradition is back at Lincoln Park Zoo and celebrating 30 years. Get your tickets now for Zoo Lights, presented by ComEd and Invesco QQQ, and enjoy fun seasonal activities while strolling through your zoo under 3 million lights this holiday season. Zoo Lights will be back November 15th and run through January 5th. Tickets are just $7 to $10 with select free nights. Get your tickets at lpzoo.org/zoolights and learn more and secure your spot before it sells out. Today on CityCast Chicago, universities are cracking down on student protests. The city needs to speed up lead pipe removal, and we've got plenty of film festivals to add to your calendar. Helping me break it all down from Chalk Beach Chicago, Rima Amin, and WBEZ's Patrick Smith. It's Friday, October 11th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Good morning, my friends. Rima, welcome to the podcast. Beautiful to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's my first time and I'm so excited.
Hey, we are grateful that you answered our email, that you are joining us on this Friday, and welcoming back a guest that, if you've been listening to CityCast Chicago over the last couple of years, a voice you should recognize, Patrick Smith. Good to have you back, my friend.
So good to be back. Good to be on with Rima, one of my favorite reporters in the city. So great to be here.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to do this. If you are new to CityCast Chicago, every single day throughout the week, we're talking about this beautiful city of ours. And then on Friday, we bring in these amazing journalists, these amazing voices from across the city to talk about the stories on their hearts and minds this week. But before we get into that, the Chicago Marathon is coming up this weekend. And myself, I am not a runner. Sometimes I run to catch the train, but then when I'm sitting on the train, I am regretting that 2 minutes. But one thing I do know is that pre and post race meals are critical to not only long distance runners, but sprinters as well. I want to turn back the clock to Wednesday when we did an episode featuring our friend Allison Yates from Read and Run Chicago, somebody who leads running tours around Chicago, to talk about some of her favorite places to fuel up, to get carbs around the city. And so I wanted to ask y'all, Patrick, I want to start with you. Where's a place you like to carb up in the city?
I love Loaf Lounge in Avondale. It's actually right by my daughter's daycare, so it gives me an excuse. More often than I should, I probably stop there to get a breakfast sandwich. They make an awesome focaccia, chocolate cake. I don't get all that at once, although maybe I have before, but Loaf Lounge is where it's at for me.
Rima, what about you? Where do you like to get a couple good carbs?
Yeah, so when I think of carbs, I think of bagels. And I'm a bit of a bagel snob because I lived a few years in New York City. But Steingolds over by me in like Ukrainian Village, West Townish area is so good. Their bagels are excellent. And the perk is that they have this they have really good cold brew that's just you serve yourself. So you can kind of down half of yours while you're waiting for your bagel and just fill it up again. Maybe you're not supposed to do that, but that's what I do.
Reba, that is a good tip. I did not know that. I'm going to go. I could chug too much cold brew, so that sounds good.
Allison actually mentioned Steingolds on our list, so if people want to go back to our entire rundown, please go to our Wednesday episode. You'll see all the restaurants we talked about. I want to give another shout out to Robust Coffee Lounge. I mean, whether you're looking for a breakfast sandwich in Woodlawn, oatmeal, bagel and lox, French toast, they got you, and they got plenty of space for you to bring your laptop and just sort of sit in there throughout the day. And so shout out to Robust Coffee Lounge. Again, we want to hear from y'all. Where are y'all favorite places to carb below in the city of Chicago? Whether you're running or you're not running, please let us know by leaving us a text or a voicemail at 773-780-0246. As I said, every Friday, we like to bring in our friends to talk about some of the big stories happening around the city. And Rima, I feel like even though we've talked about it a few times this week, we have to start with the ongoing drama surrounding Chicago's school board. Earlier this week, we covered the rapidly evolving story here. Quick recap for folks. After seemingly weeks or months of tension between City Hall, Chicago Public Schools, and also the school board on how to move forward on CPS CEO Pedro Martinez's employment, strategies for covering school budget gaps, the entire school board resigned last Friday. And on Monday, Mayor Johnson nominated 6 new members. Rima, I got to ask you, what was your reaction to the speed of these resignations and these new appointments?
Yeah, so it's funny. It was a stunning development on Friday, and like really something that the city hasn't seen, I think, ever in that way. But we had been hearing kind of rumors, murmurs that board members were considering resigning for weeks, or that like that could be something that would happen because of the ongoing turmoil and the disagreement about what to do over CPS's budget.
Were there rumors that all of them, or maybe a
No,
couple?
so that's
Okay.
that's what I was just going to say, was that the fact that all of them resigned or submitted their resignations on the same day was absolutely stunning. And I mean, this is something that we even heard was going to happen that week, and it still felt stunning in the moment. So I think I think what makes it especially stunning is that I keep using that word, but it's the fact that it's coming just a couple of months before Chicago school board elections. And so there's just so many moving pieces. The mayor's got a lot of other issues on his plate as well. So it just feels like a lot.
What has been the fallout since the press conference on Monday, which has been covered a lot in the days since?
Yeah, so it's been, I would say relatively, on the quieter side since that Monday press conference where Mayor Johnson named 6 appointees to replace the folks that resigned last week. And this kind of happened after board members resigned. 41 alder people signed a letter that called for a hearing into what's going on at CPS, which is, somebody joked on Twitter to me that it's hard to get, 20 alder people to sign a letter that would make mustard the official condiment to a hot dog in Chicago. So it's like very hard to get people to agree really to anything in city council. We've seen a lot of talk from elected officials on the city and state side of doing some kind of intervention with CPS. But the fact is that, the mayor has total control over appointees until there is an elected school board. So, it's not clear that really city council or the state can really do anything to kind of step in here in a way that they want to. The other development is that there are ongoing conversations about how to resolve CPS's, impending budget deficit. And the CPS CEO, Pedro Martinez, said that he has been advocating with the city for months to use TIF funds, tax increment financing funds, and, using essentially these city funds to help fill the budget gap. The mayor's office responded to that and said, we've offered that up, and the CPS CEO didn't take us up on it. And so, it continues to be messy, I guess, would have been the quicker way to say that.
Patrick, I want to bring you in here because does Brandon Johnson deserve any benefit of the doubt here? Because it feels like it's been a largely one track narrative of chaos, inability to collaborate, right? Yada, yada. But could this also be seen as an aggressive and urgent political maneuver to take the Chicago's public schools in a more equitable direction in the long run, as the mayor and his allies suggest?
Well, I guess what I would say instead is maybe he doesn't deserve benefit of the doubt, but maybe there's more blame to go around than just on the mayor. I mean, this was his school board. The fact that he kind of couldn't get them to do what he wanted to do, that he couldn't do that transformation with the people that he either put in place or kept in place when he became the mayor. I don't think that speaks well of his leadership on this particular issue, at least. I will say, Rima, you would know better than I would, but the fact that the board members resigned, they could have stayed in place and said, no, we're fighting for Pedro Martinez. We want to stick up for Pedro Martinez. They didn't do that either. It seems like they're kind of rebuking both the mayor and the current CPS CEO. So I don't know if that's, a benefit of the doubt for the mayor, but at least he's not the only one who is sort of being dissed by this, for lack of a better word, by this decision by the entire board. I'll also just say, I mean, Rima mentioned, we're going to vote in like a month for the first time ever. I can't think of a better argument for an elected school board than the idea that the mayor is going to appoint an entire school board. He had like 4 days to pick an entire school board. Now that part of it he had to do, right? Once the resignations happened, he had to pick a new one. But
or he implied that these 6 people may have been on the larger list of potential nominees for the forthcoming elected school board, in which he still holds the ability to put 11 members, right?
Right. I'm not saying he pulled them out of a hat or he had never heard of these people before, but still the idea of like the decision makers being picked in a couple days or over a weekend.
For sure.
Me as a taxpayer, I'm like, yeah, I'd rather have a say in that than just one person picking after, over a couple days.
Yeah, it might be a walking advertisement for folks to get registered and vote,
Yeah.
Speaking of those elections, we are less than a month away, Rima, and you and your colleagues are hosting forums. You all are making these videos available to the public. What else are you doing to help Chicagoans wrap their brain around yet another thing we got to vote for?
Yeah, so we actually partnered with WBEZ and so the Sun Times to create voter guides for the public. And so we have print versions of those and trying to distribute those all over the city, as well as to incarcerated voters. And, those have answers. Those have questionnaires from candidates in every district about every topic you can think of: the budget, school choice, facilities, infrastructure, all of that good stuff. And then Chalkbeat has also written profiles of each district that are going to be up for election on November 5th. And yes, this week we actually spent hosting candidate forums that we live streamed on YouTube for all 10 districts. And, I think they went really well. And I found it really encouraging that there are a ton of smart people running for office. And I just think that's so cool. And, we tried to cover a lot of ground in those too. So shout out to to my boss, Becky, who kind of spearheaded all of that. And we should tell your listeners to go to Chalkbeat's YouTube channel and you can see the candidate forums for every district there. But yeah, we're less than a month away from the elections, and people are going to see these names on their ballots when they go to vote on November 5th. And this is just the beginning. Folks that are going to get elected are going to be part of this larger hybrid board, as you mentioned earlier. The mayor's going to get to appoint 11 people. There's going to be 10 elected representatives, but by 2027, it's going to be a fully elected board. So this is like a really, it's a transition, but it's a really important first step.
Going to the orthodontist doesn't have to be spooky. Often it can be stressful trying to find the proper time, funds, and doctor for your family's orthodontic treatment. Luckily, Orthodontic Experts is where the best value, quality, and accessibility align. Their orthodontists guide you through treatment with kindness and professionalism. They provide exceptional orthodontic care with various options, including traditional metal, gold, ceramic, and lingual braces and clear aligners. Orthodontic Experts accepts most major insurances and even creates personalized payment plans for you. And they offer evening and weekend availability that will easily fit into your busy schedule. And the best part is that the clinics are always located conveniently near you. Why wonder? Find out if orthodontic treatment is right for your family with a no-cost consultation at Orthodontic Experts. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Back when I was in college, going to therapy was not something me and my homies openly discussed. So when I attended my initial sessions, I kept it entirely to myself. And honestly, I kind of felt like I was wearing a mask with my friends and family. Luckily, in the years since, I've watched more and more people destigmatize the conversation and remove the taboo from therapy. However, for many, they still don't know exactly where to go if they are considering giving talk therapy a try. And if that sounds like you, try BetterHelp. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/citycast to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/citycast. Let's stay on schools, but move to higher education. Back in the spring, we saw a wave of pro-Palestinian, anti-apartheid marches, movements, and encampments on campuses across the country and, of course, the city of Chicago. While some held on for weeks, most by the end were met with not only counter-protests, but middle-of-the-night dismantling, some cases mass arrests, and even academic sanctioning. Now, a couple months into the new semester, we have a better understanding on how universities across Illinois have been cracking down on student protests. Patrick, what's the latest?
Yeah, my colleague Lisa Curry and Phillip had a story out yesterday on Thursday about those crackdowns that you're talking about. I mean, basically every Chicago area university has new rules for this new quarter or new semester as the new school year starts, suppressing free speech and sort of telling students and faculty when and where they can protest. University of Chicago, Northwestern, University of Illinois Chicago, they all have new rules, including bans on overnight encampments and restrictions on when students can use amplified sound. Loyola is restricting demonstrations to a designated free speech zone. I'm using air quotes for because this is an audio medium, that students say is on like it's sort of like a corner of campus that's less visible. And we've seen it in action already. On October 7th, there were walkouts at a number of schools, and those students were punished or threatened with punishment at DePaul. They called the cops on the walkout. They said they didn't have a permit to be where they were. At Northwestern, students were sent a notice of a disciplinary warning that they had violated a new ban on amplified sound before 5 p.m. All sorts of rules here. Administrators say this is to allow for everyone to express their opinion and avoid disruptions which harm learning. Students and faculty that Lisa spoke to said this is just anti-free speech and it's suppressing specifically pro-Palestinian speech. And one thing I thought was really interesting that she heard from multiple people was they think this movement is happening because they think the protests last semester were effective. That basically it got a lot of attention. They think it really helped draw attention to the Palestinian cause, and they think that's why they're seeing more crackdowns in this new school year.
Yeah, as a public speaking professor, I have heard from my students in this current semester the increased pressure they feel about expressing their political views on campus, meeting with other students to hold reading circles, and even those have been threatened by professors or threatened by staff members. And I agree with that last point you made. It's when you see rules being so quickly enacted across universities, across colleges, and they're all sort of using the same PR speak. To me, I think that does speak to the effectiveness of the protests last spring.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, in slight defense of university leaders, there's and this isn't a defense of giving up your principles, and they would say they haven't given up their principles, to be clear, but there's a real spotlight on them. I mean, at Northwestern, their leader, who is Jewish, came to an agreement with the pro-Palestinian encampment. They made certain concessions and they took down the encampment. And then he was called before Congress and was accused of enabling and empowering anti-Semites. And so again, that's, if you think this is the wrong move, that's not a defense of that. But you could see where they feel this increased scrutiny and increased pressure to really sort of restrict free speech, or because they can't please, they're never gonna. There's always somebody who's gonna be pissed off at them.
For sure.
Again, that's an argument for sticking with whatever your true core principles are, though.
Every single week on CityCast Chicago, we also cover stories that may have not been on the front pages of our newspapers. And long-term CityCast Chicago listeners probably know how angry I get when we talk about Chicago's nation-leading number of hazardous, brain-damaging lead pipes. The last two mayoral administrations, to their credit, at least talked about the issue out loud, lobbied the state and federal governments for more money for removal, and even budgeted for lead pipe removal. However, the city got some pretty distressing news this week, Rima, from the Biden administration. What was that news?
Yeah, so it sounds like the Biden administration is, speeding up this deadline that Chicago has to replace a number that I did not know, more than 400,000 lead service lines, cutting that deadline in half. And I actually didn't know how much uh, leeway or power the federal government had on this, but it sounds like quite a bit. And this is going to cost, apparently, as WBEZ reported, it's going to cost the city $14 billion. And if you know anything going on about, if you know anything about the city budget right now, $14 billion is not a figure that's just lying around. There's not a bank full of $14 billion right now to cover that. So I think this news seemed to be distressing to the city. And there was an alderman, Anthony Beale, on the South Side in the Ninth Ward, who said this is like another unfunded mandate. So I expect we're going to hear more of that from city leaders.
Yeah, I mean, the budgetary part is distressing. Again, it does seem, to Rima's point, it does seem like there should be, and Anthony Beale's point, there should be some funding to go along with this. Getting those lead service lines replaced seems pretty important, though. Like that timeline of 20 years doesn't seem that short to me. Like, I get we don't have the money for it, but also it does need to happen.
Yeah, it's been a problem for so long. And I found this particularly interesting because this is it's so damaging to particularly young children whose brains are still developing. And it's like we are in this situation because presumably, and I'm sure Jacoby you'll jump in on this, like we just haven't really chosen to do anything to replace these pipes for so many years.
Lack of political will and decades of, I'm going to just call it corruption. The Bailey Daily Connection. We did an entire episode about while most cities in America for at least decades at the time when 1986 happened, the federal government officially banned lead pipes. Chicago was still installing them at a rapid pace. And that was largely because the Plumbers Union, which was ran by Stephen Bailey, had a connection with Mayor Daley, the older Mayor Daley, and made it where the city of Chicago had to install these pipes and had to make sure that city plumbers were the ones doing it. And so, 400,000 plus. The current budget had about 169 million, which they say would have replaced around 5,100 lead service lines. At that pace, it would take us 80 years, I believe, to replace all of these lead pipes. And so the federal government has lended the city. Let's be clear. They did not give us. They lended us about $336 million last year. But again, that's a drop in the bucket of the $14 billion needed. And so we will drop a link for people to listen to our lead pipe episode. And you can feel as hopeless about Chicago's ability to solve this as I do.
Yeah. And to Rima's point about young brains, we just had my daughter's 1-year checkup. And we don't have lead pipes in our house, but they test for lead in the blood. And lead, she doesn't have lead in her blood. But you're sweating that when the results come back. There's, even though we don't have them in our house, she's, anyway, it's a real thing.
Schools, public buildings. It's so pervasive across the city of Chicago. And of course, like many of the terrible things that inflict city residents, the highest concentration are in Black and brown neighborhoods. One more story before we get to my favorite part of every episode, which of course is the good news. Patrick, a major civil suit came up this week that includes some names that a lot of Chicagoans will know, like Little Durk and the late rapper FBG Duck. It was a lawsuit brought by Duck's mother, Lashina Weekly. Can you explain this civil suit for listeners?
Yeah, it's a unique lawsuit. It's as you mentioned, the family of FBG Duck suing Lil Durk, the estate of King Von, who's another very famous Chicago rapper who has been murdered, as well as their record labels and some other people on the label, including one of the labels being sued is Sony Music. And this all goes back to the August 2020 murder of FBG Duck. His real name was Carlton Weekly. There was a daylight shooting in the Gold Coast outside of Dolce & Gabbana. I think he was shot 16 times. His girlfriend was also shot in the same shooting, although she survived. And in the lawsuit, Duck's family claims that King Von essentially orchestrated this killing. He put a bounty on Duck's head. And it also claims that Durk is the leader of the O Block gang that murdered Duck. And they say that Durk has responsibility as the gang leader and that he capitalized on FBG Duck's murder. And that Sony as one of the record labels, made money off of FBG Duck's murder and also just off of the violence, the kind of back and forth violence that this rivalry was a part of. There was a federal trial over FBG Duck's murder. 6 were convicted. Federal prosecutors had evidence that did show that King Von put a bounty on Duck's head, that he gave chains to some of the people who shot him. So this lawsuit uses a lot of what came out in that federal trial. A couple of things I just want to note. One of the pieces of evidence in this lawsuit that got filed is artwork from an album that Lil Durk's group put out that is like a gang hierarchy that shows Lil Durk at the top as the boss, and that's their evidence, one of their pieces of evidence. So obviously there are First Amendment issues there.
I was going to say, we're seeing a escalating number of cases in which rap lyrics and just general connections, relationships are being used as primary evidence in like large scale, both criminal and civil cases.
Right. I mean, obviously we see it in Young Thug's case in Atlanta. It came up in the case over FBG Duck's killing, using like music and videos as evidence in that case. So I think the real reason I'm interested in this is, drill rap is a really interesting beast, invented in Chicago. It's become international, but there's a lot of there's a real incentive to be like, quote unquote, real. And what the market demands is reality. And what reality means is, are you actually involved in violence? Are you actually touching the violence?
People are so very clearly naming previous people that they've been in conflict with, like current people in their circle. Like a lot of it is like deep, realistic storytelling that seemingly describes like crimes start to finish. And that, of course, is now being used against a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, and before FBG Duck was killed, King Von put out a video that showed him killing somebody, named Duck. It's very explicit. And I think the thing that's most interesting is, you have this instance where most of the people making this music in Chicago are like young, poor Black people. And the market is telling them that what we want out of you, if you want to be successful, if you want to be to make money here, you have to be violent. And so this lawsuit is getting at the idea that a big corporation like Sony is actually incentivizing and funding, allegedly, gun violence in Chicago. And I think that's pretty interesting. I think you can decide whether you want to blame individual people who are doing the rapping and the shooting. Obviously, people doing the shooting deserve some blame. But this lawsuit is also getting at, do the big corporations making money off this too, do they deserve any blame?
Hi, this is David Plotz of CityCast. Have you thought about a gift for yourself this year? One that has the power to help you grow and learn and become a better version of yourself? Give yourself the gift of language by getting Babbel. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by language experts, Babbel gets you talking a new language in 3 weeks, because talking is the key to really knowing a language. And that's how Babbel approaches it. It's designed for real conversation. So I have a trip to France planned with my girlfriend. Was it inspired by the Olympics? Yes, it was. And it's given me the chance to revive my old high school French. And it's so fun to catch back up with the vocabulary I'd forgotten, to remember all the food. For example, I'm in a lesson on ingredients, so I'm going to make crepes with butter and sugar. Avec sucre et de beurre salé, on va se régaler. We're going to have a feast. They learned this great new French expression too. J'en ai l'eau à la bouche. That means I have water in the mouth. That means it's mouth-watering. Love it. Love French. Anyway, Babbel gets you talking, and studies from Yale and Michigan State University and other leading universities prove that it works. So here is a special holiday deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast, spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends the same way, and that's me begging you to come back for our next episode. We won't have an episode on Monday for Indigenous Peoples Day, but will be back on Tuesday, and I hope all of y'all will join us. Other than that, every episode ends with some good news. Oh, that was a good one.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
I just want to sit with that one for a second. I appreciate y'all. Rima, what is your good news, CityCast listeners? This can be an event you're looking for in the weekend, a fun story you read, something positive happening in your life, a good nap you took earlier this week. Oh, I had a good one.
No naps, but I'm going to share somebody else's good news, and I've gotten her permission to share it. My colleague Sammy, who's been on CityCast,
Sammy Smiley,
became an auntie this week. Her sister had a baby. Her name is Zoe, and mom and baby are doing great. She's very, very, very cute, and Sammy is so excited. So that honestly felt like the best news of this week, I guess.
That's fantastic news. Sending love to Sam and her entire family. We love having you and all of y'all colleagues over at Chalk Beach Chicago on the podcast. We appreciate all of y'all and all the work y'all do. Pat, over to you. What is your good news, CityCast Chicago today?
You know what? I'm going to troll the Chicago baseball fans who don't have any playoff baseball to watch. I got my Detroit Tigers hat on right now, and I've just been loving this Tigers magical run. They're still in the playoffs, playing meaningful baseball. I'm having a blast. So sorry, Cubs and White Sox fans.
Game 4, by the time people are listening to this, Game 4 will have already happened. Detroit will either be on to the next round or they will be in a critical Game 5 against the Cleveland Guardians. For Patrick's sake, I hope they lose so that you have to sit through a nasty Game 5 with all that back sweat.
Oh, if we do have to go to Game 5, Tariq Skubal, the best pitcher in baseball, taking the mound for us. So I'm feeling all right. But see, I tried to give my answer so that this could run. I just said they're playing baseball. It doesn't matter. We know one way or another they're still playing baseball when this comes out.
I will end us out today with my good news. We got a ton of great theater festivals coming up or already going on in the city, including the 7th annual Destinos Latino Theater Festival, which is ongoing through November. Today is the start of the inaugural Chicago Filipino American Theater Festival. And next week, the 60th annual International Film Festival kicks off. I got links and show notes for all 3 events. And if you want to find out about other film and theater festivals happening around the city, one of the best places to go is chicago.citycast.fm and check our events calendar, which is curated by our Hey Chicago newsletter editor, Sydney Madden. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest this week, Rima Amin from Chalk Beach Chicago. Rima, always a great time. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you so much.
And Patrick Smith, I appreciate you dropping by once again, editor from WBEZ.
Thank you.
Before we get out of here, I got to give a huge thank you to the people who make CityCast Chicago possible every single day. Our executive producer is Simone Alicea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our Hey Chicago newsletter editor is Sydney Madden. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. And as always, my last thank you is for you. The people who listen to CityCast Chicago, who read Hey Chicago, the people who tell their friends and family about the show, who leave us a rating wherever they listen, who make sure they subscribe to the newsletter, who open it every day. I want to give a thank you to everybody who is a member of CityCast Chicago, everybody who's going to become a member of CityCast Chicago. Again, a reminder, we'll be back early on Tuesday and we got something fun for you where you'll get to hear from not only me, but other hosts around the CityCast network about some cool things happening in their city. So make sure you're back bright and early on Tuesday. Enjoy your extended weekend if you got one. I'll talk to you next week. Peace.